Welcome to the Creative Freedom Plan, a podcast and membership hosted by yours truly, Michal Emily Schuster. I'm here to empower creatives like you with the training you need to become full-time, financially free online entrepreneurs. On this podcast, I'm sharing all of my best strategies, wisdom, and mindset shifts that will allow you to self-actualize as a creative, build the business of your dreams, and become truly free. Welcome back to the Creative Freedom Plan podcast. So excited to have you here today for a special guest interview. My friend Adrienne is here with us today, and I've known Adrienne basically my whole life. Our dads got to be friends in college, maintain that friendship. So we basically grew up together and recently reconnected at a friend's wedding where we were just catching up on life and love and lessons learned and having this amazing conversation. And we turned to each other and it's like, we should have been recording the whole time because this is a podcast. So that entered the conversation for bringing Adrienne on the show, and she agreed to share her journey in creative entrepreneurship with you, with, some of the big milestones and takeaways and lessons learned that she's got to learn the hard way. So Adrienne, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and, share who you are and what you're all about and what you do in the world.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to join you. And we really do have family ties. So it's very fun to see where you're at and how you're building such an amazing resource and community for entrepreneurs, especially the creative types. So my name is Adrienne Bousquet, and I also go by Mrs. Hoover because I'm married to an awesome guy. I tend to go by my maiden name in business and things. So for those purposes, you'll know me as that. Currently, I work as an entrepreneur in the professional organizing capacity, and I own a small business called Organize and Spruce. That has been my baby for almost 12 years in November, actually. And yeah, it's so really wild when I think about how many years that's been. It's like the most consistent, longest term anything in my whole life, I think. Yeah, and then I do work corporately still as an office manager and managing corporate real estate for a tech company, and have been amazingly fulfilled by that as well. So my journey is full of weaving in and out of being full-time self-employed and also being at the whim of others in a good way for the most part. But yeah, we live out here in almost at Eastern Washington. I'm from Eastern Washington, so Tri-Cities area, and then I live in Western Washington outside of the Bellevue area. So very happy, full of life. We're remodeling our home and we have a sweet dog we rescued, and life has been really good. It's a wonderful season for my husband and I.
That's amazing. I'd love to just celebrate you on 12 years in the entrepreneurship space. I think there's some crazy stat like 70% of businesses don't make it past the 10-year mark. So you're like already one of the rare few. That's incredible.
And even just that first year or restaurants can be months. So it is good to be in the company of others that are just pursuing no matter what.
I can't wait to get into your story, how you got started, and all those milestones and lessons learned along the way. But first, I would love to hear anything that is really capturing your interest right now. Topics, anything that you're obsessing over. What are you really excited about in this season of life?
You know, today with my small business group, I had the chance to give back. We have an organization in the Snoqualmie Valley called Feed Kiddos that takes care of the snack needs, small meal needs of kids over the weekend, that time between Friday and Monday when maybe they don't have as much going on at home in terms of food. So we stuffed bags this morning for, I don't even think it was an hour, and we stuffed 400. So it was really, yeah, it was great. And it's been a while since I had an opportunity to, and I hate the way this sounds, but I haven't been in a like volunteer moment in a while. So it was great. And it's just down the street. So I'm going to recruit my husband and get on the rotation because it's a worthwhile thing to do. And then on the total flip side, In my corporate world today, I was booking a team dinner for next week for 20 people, and it's at a steakhouse I haven't been to in the Bellevue area. So I texted my husband. I was like, because I know he's been. So it's a travesty that I have not. So I have filet mignon on the brain.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's got reservations. We're going in November for sure.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So going back to your journey in entrepreneurship, from my perspective, being like younger sister to you almost and watching you like go through high school and college ahead of me, but
Mm-hmm.
from my perspective, you've just always been entrepreneurial. Like it's kind of just core to who you are. So I would just love to hear like your experience with that in high school, heading into college, like what that looked like for you,
Mm-hmm.
stepping into that space and having just this total confidence in yourself and your abilities and really going for it.
That's a great jumping off point. As you're saying that, it was coming to mind. There's a few key parts to explore, and one of them is like blind confidence. And then the part I will start with, though, is that it might be kind of a millennial thing, but my parents were very oriented to work on what you love, like do what you love. If you love an activity, you can try it out. And so, with that upbringing and me being a very type A personality, it drove me to get very excited about the things I liked and find ways to do them. And long before high school, even, I loved singing and dancing. So like kind of that first moment where I didn't even realize I was being an entrepreneur, but I left volleyball. It's like end of senior or beginning of senior year to start singing at local wineries and restaurants. And it was strangely received, as you can imagine. Or was it? It might have been junior year, actually. I was 16 or 17. So, yeah, anyway, semantics to the whole story. But there was there was just that first gig. It was in town for the Harvest Festival, and I knew the arranger organizer, and he said, "Oh, well, you can do some songs." And I had my 5 backing tracks from songs from the Rat Pack era, and I had a fun sequin dress, and I got up there on stage and I sang these songs, and it was, I mean, just from the fact that that's my art, it was so amazing, and I had no fear whatsoever. And the to briefly touch on how I even had the gall to go up there and do this, it's I'm not a stage fright person. I love public speaking. I don't mind it whatsoever. And when earlier in this, whatever this was, I think it was 2007, I started working in town. My first job was at a restored historical theater. And so it was movies, but it was also theater and shows. So I did snack bar and loved to like keep that place super tidy. And then there was a community talent show we were going to do. So I put myself out there, and after the fact I learned that my boss and coworkers were kind of like snickering about it. Like, oh yeah, Adrienne's going to sing, okay. And then yeah, isn't that so funny? So, and I didn't, I mean, I Mitchell, my brother, will tell you how annoying it was, like all this garbled sounds from my room, because I was singing all the time. Like I was totally that kid. I was definitely obsessed with learning songs and just belting them out, dancing.
Yeah.
I did gymnastics. There was all these activities that kind of set me right up for this community talent show. And so I did 2 songs. I sang Roxy from Chicago, and I sang Sentimental Journey, which is a really amazing Doris Day song. And that led me to then just keep going. And I remember my mom was watching the video over and over that they had captured of me singing. I remember asking, like, was it good? Am I any good? And so it was definitely a yes, but they were processing it as parents. There's their 16-year-old daughter with like sounds like she's in the 40s in a lounge. Like it was just very difficult for them. And my high school principal was actually sitting behind them and like leaned up and was like, did you guys know? So it was hysterical. It was a really amazing start to what has been singing has long been a part of my life, and performance I really rarely get the chance to anymore, which is another topic in and of itself.
But I gotta ask,
Yeah, please do.
what was your boss and coworkers' reaction after like snickering at you for signing up, and then you get up there and it's like belted out like you're a
Like, what,
professional?
when's the next time you can perform? Like, what's on the agenda this summer for community events? And in my head, I was already like, take me to American Idol. I'm ready for this. Let's do this. I was a star in my own mind for sure, which segues right into then there was this draw towards pageants. And there's local chapters of the Miss America program in Washington, and I was near the Tri Cities one. And so the closest thing I had to doing something on that stage was this Miss America program, Miss Tri Cities. And I really was a bit turned off because my mom did pageants, and you never want to do what your mom also did at that age. So I was very turned off. However, the Tri Cities program is one of the largest awarders of scholarship money in the state, and then they're ranked pretty well nationally. So that's hard to ignore when you're going into college in the fall and it's your responsibility to pay for tuition. So
Totally.
yeah, so I swallowed my pride about that and ended up being first runner up or second runner up. Yeah, Alyssa was first runner up, who's somebody dear to both of us as well. I had a great time. Did a little bit of like princess duties because that's what you do in a couple months after. But overall, I went off to college and was excited to be at WSU, where our dads went, and to have my college days. And this was also with the knowledge that, okay, that was great. I don't think I'm going to do it again. Maybe not. And the directors had already asked, like, hey, come back. Like, it's pretty normal for girls to do this more than one time. And there's a lot of development that comes from that. And I didn't quite see it that way. Uh, but there are many stories across the country of, getting, and the program's changed quite a bit, but it used to be between 18 and 24. And some gals would start at 18 and they would just work their way through different locals and go to state different times. And they might be 23 or 24, like on one of their last attempts. And then that's when they win. And there's a lot of personal development. So I do respect the program for that very much.
What did you get out of it in terms of personal development?
I mean, again, I went into that with so much blind confidence. I really need to define. It's sort of that um, there's no guardrails saying anything around you should be nervous or what will others think. There's maybe a tiny bit of that because I mean, maybe it might be a psychopathy or sociopathy if you don't have any of that going on. But I just felt very true to myself when I was out in front of others.
It sounds like a childlike quality, and I don't mean that in the negative sense. I mean, you see little kids and they love to perform and love having attention, and there's no sense of shame or any kind of insecurity and embarrassment around like who they are and how they express themselves. To me, it sounds like a real strength that you had, that you held on to this innocent kind of blind confidence so long into your life.
And I will also add that part of me made me intimidating or hard to understand among my peers through high school specifically, which is already a tough time. So I didn't have like my outlet was singing, and my connections were teachers a lot of the time. So I found my niche, but not in a way that fed me. So then there I was, like starting this, what was really starting a business, singing in high school. And then boom, I'm into what is a business too, because you're training and you're creating a brand around yourself with pageant world. My comfort level being up on stage was almost amplified by the last 4 years of my life, thinking like high school era. That was just a warm up. Like, I don't need to worry about any of those people. I don't need to worry about what was thought of me because I knew who I was. And now in this group, they see that. So then it's almost like, okay, I'm turning up the volume.
Mm, mhm.
Yeah, that would be how I could characterize sort of the blind confidence, a true sense of I'm going to go forth and I'm not thinking of consequences, and not necessarily consequences that are bad, but I'm just not attached to what might happen because I'm just living in the moment.
Mm.
Yeah. And I really operated that way for a long time and sometimes still do, but it always comes in hindsight. That's what I think is fascinating. As I get older, I feel like I'm catching on to some of my themes, my personal way of doing things. I'm like, oh, that, I recognize that. But well into your 20s, you're just sort of doing and going and figuring things out.
Did something happen where you realized, oh, this isn't really the best way for me to operate in the world? Like, what happened for you to kind of integrate it or
Mhm.
make changes?
Yeah, that's a really good way to jump into just where the difficulty started because being in college, going through different relationships, and for me, putting my life down on paper, viewing things as what do they look like to others and what is my ultimate goal. So I was really geared towards what does everything line up to be and how do I make that a reality? And
Mm.
I left the WSU Pullman campus to go and do the pageant a second time and to win. And before I moved, and then when I did and I won, I had laid all of that out and then it came true. So I almost created a false sense as I look back because I had true blind confidence that if I put this into motion, like it's always going to happen because look, it just did. And things have been on the up and up since I left my small town. So, what's out there to stop me? I changed my major around a lot, and there was not this linear path that I thought there would be. I had to move a few times. I felt alone at different moments. When you're in relationships in your early 20s, they feel like it's the biggest thing in the world. I put a lot of energy and effort into boys and dating because I was trying to find the guy and do the school, get the degree, do the singing, be the singer, be the former Miss Tri-Cities in the community. Sometimes I felt like a celebrity. I'm not even kidding. It was so entertaining at times. And within all of that, also coach gymnastics and become a spokesmodel for a company that was local. And so I was always pursuing multiple things, not slowing down and working on my perception of myself. Outwardly, perception is reality. So it did matter to me in some capacity. But if you ask people that know me, especially my brother, he thinks I don't care what other people think at all. I think that's a compliment. I like to just go forth and be and not worry. But there was
Yeah.
part of me that did. Like when I was working in these different capacities, I really wanted to like feel solid and I wanted to just start my life. And something maybe other people have heard that honestly is so detrimental, and you might have too, honestly. Oh, you're so grown up for your age. I started hearing that. Oh,
Feels so good when you hear that.
yeah. So I was 18. I was always wanting to grow up. So I was like 18. People, oh, I thought you were like 22. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And now I get carded and I'm like, yes. So it's totally reversed. But I was always wanting to be grown up.
But like that total sense of you knew who you were and you knew what you were going after, and there was nothing that anybody could say or do to question you or make you second guess. You were checking boxes, you were wanting to feel grown up and like having your life together and like you had it all figured out. But I just have a sense that there was a missing piece here. Am I right? Was there something that, like, a piece of the puzzle that wasn't quite landing?
Yes. And I would say the energy piece of I want to have the right partner, I want the right guy. that was where I was putting a lot of emphasis amidst all of these other priorities. So then I was early 20s with a very serious boyfriend who was much older and was making life decisions based on the path I thought was with him. So everything looks great on paper. Once I graduated school, I followed him over to this side of the mountains and was engaged at that time too. So I was punching together all of these pieces of the puzzle. And in the midst of that, had already pursued trying to become a professional organizer and had my first client who was really incredible. But the the place where it all fell apart and I realized, oh, I can't operate with this idea that if I put it on paper or I like manifesting, it's not a word that I like. I think it is too, like, it kind of puts a level of confidence into what's unknown. And a lot of the times, and from a faith perspective, there's a lot that I can control when it comes to just how I act and react in the world. But there are factors at work and things going on that I'll never understand or know until hindsight tells me or until I'm faced with them. So I always felt like manifesting falls a little flat because I can make the next right move based on what I believe is true. And I might have a week ago said, no, this is the direction, and be completely informed in a new way in the next week. And then I change course. So I've become really comfortable with the changing of course
Mm,
because of how that relationship ended after getting married and after thinking, this is great, this is everything, and then falling into negative behaviors in my own way and thinking you're the problem when really it was me. And it's sitting a little heavy with me because this is the time of year when it's been quite a while, but that it just sits on my heart that I didn't know. I wasn't mature enough at the time to understand where there was an issue with me. I needed to figure it out rather than look around at everything else and call it bad. If
mm,
it's just, and if the bad just goes away, then I'll be fine. And then I can start over and I can be okay. And that's
yeah.
what I tried to do. And it didn't work very well.
I totally resonate with your experience there and like having that 100% certainty
Mhm.
in yourself and thinking that you know everything at a young age. Yesterday was the 2-year mark of me ending my long term
Oh my gosh, it's been two
relationship
years. Wow.
where it was, yeah, I just felt so certain
Mhm.
because, like, in hindsight, absolutely, that was the path that I needed to be on to learn the lessons that I needed to learn to get to everything that I have today in terms of
Mhm.
experience and wisdom. But it's time to actually step back and trust that maybe this is me talking to myself, your life
Mhm.
is guided by something even greater than you can possibly like imagine for yourself, because you can put the steps 1 2 3 into place and think that like this is exactly where you want to go,
Mhm.
and it might be or it might not. Like there's so many other factors in play there, and I just completely resonate with your experience there, because what it sounds like you're talking about is just leaning back and trusting in
Yeah.
the divine guidance. But yeah, just letting go has been so relieving for me, honestly.
Mhm. It's amazing how our stories have paralleled and intersected in different ways. It's tough to look back at times. And I knew something didn't feel quite right, but I didn't have that developed sense of trust in myself.
Mm,
And that created errors along the way, then accumulated into a failed marriage. There are so many lessons, though, that can't be ignored. And when I think about, again, to use the word heavy, it's because I took somebody else on this growth journey that I couldn't have had without him. But how brutal to bring somebody into such a serious relationship and then have them just off they go, you know? There was very solid lines of no more communication. So it's like I died to his family. And I don't think that maybe anybody else is applying that word, but in my mind, that's how I've thought about it at times. I mean, that must have been traumatic. Like, how could I have been so comfortable with that outcome? And it's because at the time I was more interested in myself than anything else. And years have gone by, and I've can thank a tremendous counselor who could parrot back to me the things I was saying, help provide me perspective, and got me to the other side of self-awareness. The one of the horrible side effects of blind confidence is a lack of self-awareness. When you can watch your reactions, you have guardrails in your brain. That's always how I thought about them. You can really manage how you're approaching things. You can wait and think before you speak. And those are things that I had to develop the hard way. So,
Wow, this is crazy to me. Like, what's clicking in my brain right now is when you talk about the word self-conscious, they're
mhm,
aware of themselves, they're self-aware. So
mhm.
that's like the strength that goes along with that fear, honestly.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and what you had like in my mind when I first hear about it, I'm like, God, that's such a strength. If everybody had that, like we'd all just be powerhouses going after our missions and our dreams and how incredible. But yeah, this is kind of my like blowing my mind right now as you paint the picture of like what the weakness to that actually was. That is so interesting.
Yeah, it was something to work through. And when you get to the what I do feel like is an other side, the way you can see it in other people is alarming. A criticism I experienced a few times in my 20s that I didn't understand was, you're just young, like it's okay. You don't understand. And that was so offensive at the time because what have I heard? I've heard that, oh, yeah, I'm so grown up for my age, and that I was so mature and confident. So then to have somebody, whatever they must have seen, take the angle of, you're just young. It's like, what? But now I look back and I'm like, yeah, because they observed a lack of self awareness. And I was operating in a way that they're on the other side of.
Mm.
Yeah.
And now you can see it.
Yeah. And that's why it's so interesting to look back on old relationships too. Who you are in those relationships is not who you are later on, but the person, my husband Mason, who I was when I met him in 2018 is starkly contrasted to who I am now. But that growth includes like a upswing. You know, there's been some valleys, but it's like this upward trajectory.
Mm.
And with other relationships at the time, I couldn't see that that wasn't what was going on. So um, marriage is sanctifying, and relationships should be sanctifying too. And so I've been so grateful and feel so incredibly blessed to have had a second chance, for God to give me another chance and have a person who compliments me so much more, challenges me in the right way, and doesn't understand me in some ways, which keeps I keep him guessing.
You need a little bit of that excitement with the security as
Oh
well.
yeah, you can't have two people that are on my level. Like, you gotta have one. Just me. He's he's like the one that's really steady. Cool Hand
Oh,
Luke is one of his nicknames.
I love that.
So yeah.
Tell me how this experience of coming into self awareness mapped onto your entrepreneurship journey.
Oh,
We can go back to talk about your first client. It sounds like you really have a soft spot in your heart for them. But tell me about how you went from one performative aspect of
mhm.
entrepreneurship into more service based. What was the trajectory there? And tie in that blind confidence, self awareness kind of path as well. I think that's so interesting.
Mm. I love the phrase necessity is the mother of invention. For me, it meant what's the thing that I can do to get where I want to go, do something interesting, build my resume. And so when I was in college still, and I wanted to add another vocation, make some more money, I took a look online to see if people organize for other people because it's always been a very strong quality. I was definitely the little one at grandma's lining my shoes up when I got to the house. It just has always been my style to make things neat and tidy. And loved playing house growing up. And I remember we did that in the barn. It was so much fun. Like we all had that sense of let's make an environment that we enjoy. So that was very strong with me. And I felt the need like I could do this for others. Like I want to. And I,
Was there an example that came through that like kind of highlighted that path for you, or was it something inside where you're like, I see that I have this talent, other people don't have this God-given talent, how can I maybe translate that into helping others?
there was the motivation of I need something more flexible that I can make money with. And I'm 22 years old. Like, what is that?
Mm,
So it felt like a necessity about doing something that was more like waitressing or, kind of one of those starter jobs that you might never include on your resume again.
mm,
So, and this is the era, I don't know how much this has changed, but there was so much push for uh, everybody get in college, go to college, 4 year degree, 4 year degree. Now that's shifting with trade schools and maybe not even going. But like the college getting into career messages narrative that I was in was you got to do stuff that's interesting. You have to do the thing that nobody expects and what are your skills, do something with your skills. So it kind of all blended together for me to land in this idea of I'm going to go in somebody's house that I don't know and get to know them and move around their things so that they're better and organized. And I secured my first client through a Craigslist ad, which now you would not do. It sounds so wild. I am, yeah, like when a Gen Z kid hears that story, oh my gosh.
mm.
It's so funny. So I did have my fair share of spam, don't get me wrong, but I got a client who was new to the area, had not had any time to be settled into her apartment, and met her in January of 2013 and worked with her for a little over a year, kept this ongoing relationship of what do you need? What are your goals? And stepped into this. I think the right phrase is jumped into the deep end of the psychology of organizing because that's such a strong component. And for anybody who's watched Hoarders, which is really not many or a majority of cases that organizers work with, but if you have seen the show, you'll recognize that there's a psychologist on the job always and that they interview.
Mm.
Because when somebody has an overabundance of things, when they can't even walk through their house, like there's some tough stuff going on in their brain. Yeah. So her and I became really close and bonded over her dog, who is wonderful. But the fact that she was trying to build a life in a new place. And it's amazing for me to look back and think about it because there's so many vivid parts, but I was so surprised at my capacity and compassion level. I just hadn't had a moment in my life where it was expressed in that way. Being a natural listening ear, I'm a kind of a talker. So all of a sudden, like I just had all the patience in the world to just listen. And what I gathered from her was different trauma, different things that she was holding on to because of the trauma, and that she didn't know how to be free of that. She sort of wanted to be. And in the course of a year, we moved her to a different apartment that was bigger, helped her let go of different things, provided some stability around, I know you're gone 7 to 7. So this session, let's just focus on some of the basics in your space so you can kick off the week really strong. It was so meant to be that she was my first client. And I truly fell in love with the business and the idea of I could do this for the rest of my life. No problem. This would be amazing.
It sounds incredibly fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all that time, I changed my degree a few times. So I had settled on business administration, knowing if I can understand what happens at corporate levels, then I can just figure it out, whatever I end up doing. So now I'm trying to apply these things I'm learning to small business, which again, I knew at that time I got the business card. Like I knew what I was doing much more than when I got started with singing. But the like creating a contract and a client agreement and how I would propose what I was going to do, I still have some of those things, and it's so much fun to see where. Yes, I actually looked at it not that long ago and went, "Ooh, that was I'm going to use. I can't believe I haven't been using that." It was some sort of detail in how I was describing the client and like the client contract. So yes, a little bit of blind confidence there. Like I never made I didn't have AI, I just
Right.
spent time in the computer lab at the university.
ChatGPT, write me a contract
Yes.
for this type of business.
Yeah, exactly. So I pursued this degree, got this degree, moved over here within a month, had a couple job offers at what would be considered tech companies, and knew, okay, in the wings, I know I'm going to come back to organizing. And I also was still super into singing and operating in this, I'm going to say something and then I'm going to do it. So I told a coworker I was going to be singing at Jazz Alley within a year or so. And then I was going to end up doing organizing. And this was just, I was learning, I was doing the corporate job, I had the health insurance, you have this urban experience. I had many fantasies of that, wearing the high heels, being in the city, and it really isn't that glamorous. I think one of the biggest, especially for any entrepreneurs that haven't been in the corporate world, it's kind of, and maybe it was more, it's not an illusion for a lot of people. It was sort of an illusion for me on a pedestal where like the corporate world is this enigma and things are so dialed in. And really, it's all string and tape and popsicle sticks and straws. Like it
People
really
just like
is. It
it.
just it's people who have lives that go do a thing in a company and then they go home. And then there's employee engagement surveys and they want to know how fulfilled you are. And do you feel like what you do matters? And if you're one of the founders or you're like rebuilding that tech platform, like maybe, but a lot of us are just doing the motions to have the rest of the day and the weekend to enjoy what we really want to do.
Yeah.
So I was disillusioned very quickly because I already had two things that made money that I loved doing.
You already knew what it felt like to be fulfilled and to
Yeah.
be of real service to somebody.
Yeah, I was
You
ruined. I was ruined. It's so
did.
funny. Kept trying to organize the break room. I was ruined. I did not want to be calling clients, renewing their subscription, showing them how the platform worked. Like this type of account manager job is very common coming out of college if you have a business degree. So I can't say I didn't march right out of there and fit the bill and do the thing I said I would do because I did. That would be another, besides relationship, that was like realizing this is sucking my soul and I have, like, this is the rest of my life. I had a very intense, for me, maybe not so much for him, but I was 23 in a conference room with my manager who was, a dad, and he's like maybe 40 something, super nice guy. And I'm almost in tears telling him what I just said, basically, which is this what it is? I couldn't believe it in some ways. And I was devastated. Yeah, it didn't sit well. And he was one of the very people who was like, oh, we should definitely hire her. There I am, like telling him I need an exit strategy.
Hearing you talk about that, it makes me even more grateful. Like, I'm already grateful that I had that crisis in
Mhm.
college,
Mhm.
looking down the gauntlet, because I suffer more from the self-consciousness and fear
Mhm.
than you did. So now I'm realizing I also have the strength to
Yes.
look at the situation and be like, what are you doing? You're setting yourself up for a job in finance. You won't see the sunlight
Mhm.
ever again. You'll be in a cubicle. You'll be off on your little island staring at a screen. I mean, I do plenty of screen work with what I'm doing now, but at least it's
Yeah.
fulfilling. Yeah. So I totally had that moment with my advisor in college in
Oh,
tears in his office. I'm like, weeks away from graduation. What have I done? This isn't what I want to do. And he just talked me off the ledge and got
no,
me to go through with it. But yeah.
I don't think I realized it was that intense for you. Oh my gosh. Ugh.
It was, yeah, there was a point in time where I was probably on the phone with my mom every other day, just
Mhm.
in tears and telling her like I'm going to drop out of college. I can't do it anymore. There's like
Mhm.
there's no point. And when you're young, you just yeah, you're just so short-sighted. You're like, "Oh my God, I've wasted 4 years of my life to put myself down a path that I don't even want to be on." But
Mhm.
obviously now with hindsight, looking back, it's like, "Yes, I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad I went through with it."
Yeah.
And then like in going through with it was able to set myself on the path that's like, "Okay, finish this."
Yeah.
And I very clearly remember the conversation with my parents where they were like, no, you're going to finish college. And I respect and love my parents enough to be like, okay, yeah, I need to have a good relationship with my family. They
Mhm.
said, maybe put their foot in their mouth after the fact, we'll support anything that you want to do after you get this degree. Just get the degree and we'll support anything you want to do. So then what do I tell them after I got the degree? I'm getting on a sailboat with a stranger I barely know, and you won't see me for months.
Oh, that is, oh man, that's amazing. It's
But
hindsight. Oh my gosh.
we both had that come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
I just, yeah, it's so funny. All the
Yeah.
parallels in our experience and in our stories.
Mhm.
Like, again, there's so many moments.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
that strong boundary by them, I respect it so much. And then there's that where you and I are forced into discomfort is I have to figure this
Yes.
out. And they're over here like doing the figure it out thing. I lived in Seattle proper. That looked like getting myself mentally prepared to drive across the city to find a Fred Meyer. Alyssa will laugh at that because she knows. But the because they don't like I need GPS and this is 2014. So the smartphones were not I mean, I didn't have a screen in my car telling me where to go. I was just listening to the directions, going the wrong way. But even something as simple as that, that's a confidence builder when there's discomfort. I needed some of those moments really badly. It's good to get outside of your comfort zone. And
Yes.
it's so like when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of live in it because there's unknowns. Like when you get away from it for a little bit and you're like, oh, I've got like cruise control on, like things are chill. Then when a challenge comes up, it's almost like, whoa. And then you remember, oh, this feels good. I'm in discomfort and that feels good too. That's okay.
We're just, I think we're wired for it some way or another. Like, if I'm not being challenged or if there's not problems for me to actively solve, I'm bored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where you get these personality types that seem to always have drama going on. It's because they're seeking out something to mess with or talk about or do. It's for productive, artistic, creative types, it's more like I need a thing to work on,
Yeah.
and something to like share with others.
Yeah.
Much more productive.
But still kind of the same route to the thing.
Yes. Anybody that's really into binging reality TV, I watch out for that type. I literally do.
Hold up. Okay, so then like the corporate life was not the thing you thought it could potentially have been.
So I lasted at that first job a little over a year, and a stroke of pure luck had this cash windfall happen and decided, okay, I can quit my job. And I was newly married at the time, so it was a joint decision. And I really thought, okay, I have all the tools in my belt. I live in a nice neighborhood. This is the right place to launch from. And that was true. Like looking back, like completely true. And what I knew from school was you need the license and you need, and just, starting to follow all the other entrepreneurs on social media at the time was get the business license, get the hashtags, get the gram, get everything, like all these little pieces, the spreadsheet for the tracking, and and that's what I did. It was November of 2015 and I was trying to make sure I come across like I have all of my ducks in a row. So when it hit January 2016, and I felt like the 4th was January 4th, like, that was my launch date. I'm official. Like I have all the things. Where are the clients?
They're just gonna come to me
Yep.
as soon as I'm set up and as soon as I'm legit. I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have starting out.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody in my neighborhood. I didn't have any outlets to get my name out there. And one of the beauties of social media is it allowed for me to figure that out. And so, what I call my stroke of genius, it really was me organically. And sometimes it's hard to have an original thought anymore because some things always come from somewhere or influenced or have already been done. But I truly was on the Buy Nothing Facebook group, which is hyper local giving, one of the coolest things out there. And I watched as people were giving away, porch pickup for 10 mason jars or whatever it might be. And it occurred to me, I can not advertise my business on here directly or sell my business services, but I can give them away. And I put the option to like leave your name, and I would randomly draw names for free home organizing services because it's just what I love to do.
People must have been so excited to jump on that.
I think I had, and it's a small community, but I had like 20 plus names. So now it might elicit like 40. At the time, I used one of those generator things and it popped out 3 names, and 2 were single moms, and 1 was a married woman mom. And all 3 of them really needed my help. This neighborhood's very affluent. So in my mind, I was going to get Susie down the street who has a humongous pantry but needs it to look great. That was going to be my aesthetic, fun,
Yeah.
put it together type of project. But no, I got 3 tough challenges. And my goal out of doing this exercise, putting myself in this position with marketing, was all 3 of these people are going to end up wanting me for other stuff. Well, none of them could afford to actually hire me. I just got to give back. And I don't even think I received bills from those 3 now that I think about it. But I was able to show up, small apartment, even though it was a really nice neighborhood. There's always people struggling everywhere. So I was able to help her and transform that small space in a few hours, and was a little sad at the time because I was like, man, this was supposed to like launch me.
Right. But what about your other names?
Yeah. So what I did is I followed up with every one of those people in a Facebook message. and didn't violate the any rules in the Buy Nothing group. But from there, had my first paying client for this side of the mountains. It started off pretty strong with a hey, we really need help being ready for our house cleaners to come over each week. Can you put everything back in place? So then you have to establish, well, what is that? How does that look? And what time do I need to be here and how long? And so it opened me up to this business model that I really leaned into, which was maintenance organizing. So I was there every week for a few hours, putting everything into place so that as the cleaners got started, they were only they weren't moving anything around. You know,
Just cleaning.
yeah,
Yeah.
the toys were.
Differentiating between tidying and cleaning, which is like things in their place versus like dirt removal.
And I love that you differentiate the two because it really is. I always, like in my client agreement, it says it's not organized if it's not clean. So we take a little time, but I do not come in with a bunch of cleaning gear. And like the vacuum's probably the most frequently used tool in that regard. But
Yeah.
uh, then that family led to another family, which led to a couple more. And I was really rolling along.
One thing I'd love to highlight for anyone listening, what I'm hearing here that I think is really important to touch on is you were responsive to what the market wanted. You had an offer out there and an idea of what you were going to provide, but ultimately it comes down to what does the market demand? What do people actually want and what do they value? And then you're able to tailor your approach to what people want. You might have some ideas of what your expertise is and what you're here to do in your entrepreneurial journey, but if there's no demand in the market for what you think you're here to do, you don't have a business.
Yes, you nailed it.
And the other thing I hear you talking about is like the consistency and the sustainability of having an offer that's weekly. So you're not just signing a client, getting one paycheck and saying goodbye and hoping that you get referrals and testimonials. You're actually there on a consistent basis, getting a consistent paycheck, building more of a relationship that way. I also think that is key, having something that's like, okay, how can I provide value on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Just a couple things I'd love my audience to key in here with your story.
Well, and to add to it too, plugging into the community, working in volunteer capacities next to the people that might hire you. And there was a couple organizations like that, one of them being the Women's Club, that whether it was like salad Wednesdays or doing the senior center Thanksgiving dinner, I plugged myself into places where I knew somebody might ask what I do for a living and might go, "Oh, I need you," or "So and so needs you." And I actually did have secure a couple projects that way. I speak highly for being plugged in with your business community and just your regular community.
The boots on the ground approach to going out there and talking to people, building relationships. I
Mhm.
feel like in this day and age, there's probably female entrepreneurial groups that meet in just about
Yeah.
every city that's not completely rural. And even in rural spaces, there's definitely women's groups and community groups that meet. And yeah, having that intention to meet people, put yourself out there, volunteer, and yeah, just start by giving value
Hmm.
without expecting in return. It's a reciprocity thing, and people respond to it. When you have this intention of, I'm just going to give and I'm going to give and I'm going to give and I'm going to give, and eventually somebody's going to ask. And that's going to be the beautiful place for me to step in and be like, you know what? I actually do have a way that I can help you that's way more robust and you're going to be way more satisfied with. So let's talk about that.
Amazing. Yes. I had separated myself from this idea of corporate life. I was set. I was like, I don't need to go back to that whatsoever. But I actually needed to. And it ended up being because of that relationship ending. I
Mm.
was forced into a very practical position. I should say I chose, not that I was forced, but I chose to be back in what was way more difficult. even though being an entrepreneur is really lonely and difficult too. And I think that's where some of my mess came from, was I was by myself way too much room to let my own thoughts swirl,
Mm.
create truth where there was lies, and walk all over my time because it was difficult to structure. And I know that there's listeners right now that are thinking like, oh, that's my least favorite part of all of this, is just trying to structure my day and not be by myself. And for me, it took like a very big life change to deal with. Now your business is on the side. Like, how are you gonna, if this is everything you ever wanted to do, like how are you gonna keep doing it? So I was back to working corporate and was really blessed to be in a capacity where all of my skills in organizing and creating like great environments and experiences were put to use, and was there through the start of COVID 2020, and then switched to another company.
So it sounds like really good kind of timing and blessing for you there.
Yeah, and in that process I had met Mason, and we were stuck in the heart of Seattle together, uh, working from home and trying to figure out, is this going to be like this forever? And
Mm.
everybody went through it in their own way. And that, like, the despair that came over me at different times. Oh, I'm so glad to not see that as a present thing with me anymore. It was really difficult. But I had resigned myself to, I don't know when I'll have a new client. I have some existing ones who are comfortable with me on like a quarterly basis, helping them out. It just kind of became about once a quarter I have a project. Somebody's hitting me up, somebody's coming online because they had a referral, and I was okay with that. I just let that be, and
Mm-hmm.
went into a new job more closely related to the construction industry, and all of a sudden had a change in ownership, threw everything out the window. Now we're doing things differently. So I had my hands in, what does the employee handbook say? What does the website need to look like? Can you be at my house when the movers arrive? Just taking my yes attitude and exploiting it to the max. That's how I look back on that. Oh my
Mm.
goodness. And that was the job that I was like, oh, I thought this was a good idea. I just want to be organizing. How do I get back? Who am I becoming? So many old things, because I was not in a happy state 8 hours of the day. How could I jump back into that the rest of the day and then have energy to put towards my fledgling Organize and Spruce business? It's so draining to be in a tough corporate job. This really was. So I got laid off, and I was so happy. Also terrifying because we were getting married a few months later.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I mean, at that point, when you're making money but you're putting up with a lot of shit, you just like, okay, all right, I guess this is what I have to
Right.
deal with, and then we'll get married, and then I'll go on this honeymoon, and I'll worry about a new job later. And so then it was like, whoop, nope, here we go. Time to have a good cry and figure out what's next. So I spent like a week watching the rest of Shameless. And Mason was like, hey, I'm looking at my fake watch here. Like, what's going on? Are you going to be okay? And how are you going to make money? And they were very valid questions. And I had yet another come to Jesus around. I remember it so vividly. Like, I don't want to work for anybody else anymore, ever. I can't. I'm not wired for this. I keep getting disappointed. I had this string of difficult bosses. You start to wonder, like, am I the asshole? That's what I started to wonder. And I've had some people assure me, like, no, when I've brought that up. I'm like, okay, well, you were there, you get it. So maybe it is just that I haven't had luck because I'm not meant to be there. So this is now, we're in February of 2022, and just through Nextdoor, I found that somebody was moving out and they needed somebody to help them get ready. So I just jumped on the post and was like, yeah, blah, 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 I can. And I messaged them, and then boom, I was doing that. And then, oh, the community I had started my business in on this side of the mountains, there is a senior living home there. that has apartments and then like assisted living. And my name had ended up on the vendor list. I don't remember all the details of how and why, but out of the blue, here comes an email. We have a resident. Her home has been deemed a walking hazard for her because of how much stuff she has. Do you specialize in this? Can you help? And so I was elated. Oh my gosh. I was like, oh, this is complex. This is organizing. This is everything. And I didn't have any worries. Like I just was right back into it.
Mm.
The joy I had every day was so great. Yeah. And I was helping her for a couple months and then it tapered off because got married, honeymoon. And then her son moved back up and I had not heard from her for quite a while. And sometimes things taper off that way. And so I would reach out to her and I wouldn't hear. And I was like, oh, was it me? Was I? But she had told me, like, my son's back. And he was an adult, but he was high on spectrum of not high functioning, but very intensely on the spectrum. So I just don't think between her age and what she was going through that me trying to talk her through, you will never make as many quilts as you have fabric. That was an actual thing I said at one point because I have you can't just come in on that. Like you got to build the trust and rapport. And maybe that was something that she realized and I made her realize it more and it wasn't she didn't want to hear it anymore. Not that I repeated it a bunch of times, but when you invite someone like me into your space and we have a closeness, professional closeness that allows me to say tough stuff. Like sometimes, even though you're open to hearing it, you realize you didn't want to.
Right.
And she's probably the only case I've had that was really like that. Actually, no, I have had another, and she was not a messy, dirty person by any means, but she had way too much stuff in her small quarters. I did have my first hoarder earlier this year, and there's oh my gosh, there's 5 levels. I thought it's 5 or 6 or 4. Right now, I don't work with them a lot, so I'm not like the source for the topic. But when it comes to the different levels, if you're at the highest one, there's bugs, there's smells, you don't just have pathways, you're like walking on top of stuff to then walk on what might be a path. And most of her home was like that. So that would be my other example of like a really difficult case.
Like, what is your mindset?
Oh, it was so brutal. Yeah. And I went into it blind, which was my fault. Because again, it was this referral from Visiting Angels Network, where they're usually in the position of coming in, giving care for a certain number of hours, and then exiting. And they had heard from the fire department. That's who got in touch with them, and then them to me. But this woman she had fallen between her chair and her couch. She was stuck for 2 days. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's so heartbreaking because then you realize it's like if I could draw it to like something really current for everybody, the hurricane happened, you don't know the extent, then you go
Yeah.
find and it's like, oh my goodness. Hoarders are out there and people have really dire living situations,
Mm.
but then you hear the story or you experience it and it just took me a while to recover from that because I thought I was capable of handling, but I was not. I was not. And I don't want to I would find that person who they need because there is coalitions and there are resources in King County, but it's not me. So she was in a lot of denial and presented herself so put together, jewelry, nails, hair. But when you walked into her home, the smell was like hit. And she hadn't opened her fridge in months. She was sure it was dead. Uh, and her kitchen counters, just for the kitchen visual, I don't want to belabor this too much, but all across the kitchen counter and then covering the floor was takeout boxes and anything that she had used to eat with at some point. And then there was a big round garbage can where you would stand and open a cupboard in the kitchen, but that was in front and it was piled many feet over the capacity. And that was how she lived. Yeah. She drank water out of jugs day to day, and you couldn't get in her sink. I don't know where, if she was just buying, 'cause she could leave her house as she pleased. I mean, she was getting her nails done somewhere, but she's a really tough case. And so I came into that situation because of this Visiting Angels Network. I talked to her on the phone because she's just far enough away from me where, and there was an urgency around this, as you can imagine. So I was probing and trying to figure out, okay, how, like, I know what I've heard. So what do I say to her to gather the right info? And one of the
Yeah.
questions I asked was, would you say that there's bags? She was open to saying, like, I have bags of trash. I was saying, would you say that those are like coming up to your knees or not? Oh, no, 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 not bad at all. So there's just to kind of land the plane here. There's a level of mental health issue with somebody who's even it's 6 levels. I'm pretty sure. Five. It's five. Okay, we're gonna people fact check me, please. But when you're like a 3 or above, there's gonna be something tough, traumatic. And she did. She went into those things with me, which I won't share here. But she was sitting at a 5. She really was. And yeah, I treasure that experience, but I couldn't do it again.
It's valuable to even have those experiences where it's like, okay, this isn't for me.
Hmm.
Because that also kind of helps shape your path. Like, you know what you're going for, and it's like along the way, okay, you can kind of branch out in different directions, feel it out. But even just having the takeaway of like, that's going to be a no
Yeah.
from here on is just, it's good to have. It really is.
There was no way I should have been alone on that. And so I gave her one day of work and had a junk hauler come, and they had snow shovels, and that's how we cleared a path in her house. It was so wild.
I'm in awe of like you even going in there, being the type A, organized, everything just so clean and put together, everything that I know about you. How did you even walk through the door? Because I don't know that I could have walked through the door,
It's
getting hit with the smell.
yeah, like it's a capacity that's hard to explain. And now I know the limits of it, but the compassion level to look at her as a person and hear what she's saying and know that you are not this. This is
Mm,
what has occurred because of the other things that have happened to you. And even the most put together home, I have a client that just came online the other week, super duper capable, doesn't see that because she doesn't have the barometer that I have. But I know that I could task her with, here's some prep work, and she'll do it. So that makes
mm.
her way ahead of the curve. So I mean, I deal with all kinds of client types, and all that time was now in this new community in the Snoqualmie Valley, trying to, again, here I am. Where are the clients? Like, I know I'm put together. I have way more tools in my belt than the first go around. So, what am I missing? I had finite resources. I had unemployment from the layoff.
To what extent was your lead generation more local and community based? And to what extent was that happening on social media?
I would say it was kind of a combo of localized social media, so Nextdoor, and then the Facebook groups that are local to my area.
Yeah. Because what you're doing, it's very like hyper personalized. You have to go in there, basically. I
Mhm.
mean, I could see where you could do some of it, maybe over conference if you have a really like proactive kind of client. But
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just like kind of wondering like to what aspect, because social media is so big in the entrepreneurship space these days, and that's just an incredible way to forge those relationships, to talk to
Mhm.
people, to generate leads. But in your specific business, it is so much more about meeting people in person.
Yeah, 100%. And with the rise of organizing in, with Marie Kondo and the home edit, the social media part seems to exist for before and afters and really good ones.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was the few clients I had, including Quilt Lady, we'll call her, I wasn't getting those. I wasn't
Yeah.
having that experience with those clients. And then with these finite resources, what was free? What could I be doing? So I'm trying to utilize social media. Nextdoor, I think it's kind of like Facebook for neighborhoods because it's hyper local, but you get people asking for, hey, does anybody know somebody who can pressure wash my roof or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
And you can advertise on there for free. So I did put my name out there. And then with the local Facebook groups that do allow business advertising, I did that too. And I would respond to posts that weren't necessarily in my wheelhouse. I was in what the consulting firm I worked at for a bit, where I was what I did right after the relationship ended, what they call AFM, because, and the CEO always loved this joke, but it's anything for money. Because in the consulting world, you have different practices. And so they have customer experience or they have, banking, and then they have AFM, anything for money. So they obviously that's a period of growth. But um, he actually, I will give credit where credit's due because I never understood this concept of a non-linear career path. And here was this highly successful, charismatic, nice guy who prided himself on look at all these twists and turns. At least it was like the checkered path or dotted
Mhm.
path of the bee as he goes back to the hive. Like, that was so amazing to hear firsthand from him. And it started to resonate with me more because I always knew like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Like I want to work for myself. And so I was in this era in the fall of 2022 where I responded to a post of somebody who lived up the road going towards the mountain and they just needed help with stacking wood. And I ended up doing that for two different people. And let me tell you, the compliments for me stacking wood from those guys. I have never, oh my hands, because they split them, but my hand is only so big. So then I've never had such sore hands in my life. Oh my gosh, I was able to like pull, although I love pulling weeds, but I didn't really tell anybody I was doing these things. We went to happy hour with friends at the end of one of these days and they were like, oh well, what'd you do today? And I totally made something up. I didn't want anybody to know because it was anything for money, but it was also, this isn't really like, I'm not really in my zone right now. I'm just getting by. I wasn't afraid to put myself in that position, but I also felt insecure about it. But yeah, if you if you have wood to stack, hire an organizer. It will not be any better ever.
Okay, but what I love hearing about the word nonlinear career path and like what you're talking about is this transformative aspect of the journey. If you're listening, take this to heart, because the moments that you go through in your journey where like you're going through it and it's kind of crushing because you're like, well, I'm not really on the path. I'm not living up to this vision that I had for myself, but you're still doing it and you're still grinding it out and you're still figuring it out as you go. Those are the moments that you're going to look back on and be like, you'll never believe what I did in the beginning of my journey in order to get to where I am now. And it ends up being this epic story. So if you're in this place where it's like, this is not what I had envisioned. I'm still committed to the vision, but like, this is what I feel like I need to do right now in order to get by. I had that moment moving back home with my parents, working on the farm. It's like, okay, well, I'm not really doing what I feel like I'm meant to do, but this is part of it. It just becomes part of the story.
Mhm.
What it sounds like, it was your boss who kind of coined the term for you, the nonlinear career path.
He was not, I was not a direct report of his. He was the CEO. But
Okay,
they made a point of new hires getting a chance to meet with him, hear the
cool.
story. Because a lot of the time you might look at somebody who's founded a company sitting in the CEO position and they checked all the boxes, right? This is what they did. But he was really proud of the way that he ended up in this, and he still is actually. So yeah, present tense in that position. So
Yeah. And when I hear you talk about stacking wood and pulling weeds, like you might not have admitted it like day of, but now
Mhm.
you're like, I did that and I stacked that wood better than
Oh,
anybody had ever stacked the wood. And
yeah.
you feel so proud of yourself.
I was organizing in the outdoors. It really was.
Yeah.
I might put it back on the list as off service offering because it's highly specialized, and sometimes there are personality types that when it comes to my home, like I want the landscapers, but I also want someone else's eye to come
Yeah.
back through this flower bed. It's like I'm your girl.
Wait,
Oh,
tell me you have some before and afters of the wood stacks.
oh, yeah, I do.
You do?
Yeah, it is. It is an yeah, I did. I did. And I'm sweeping and I'm like it was some long days. There was a very valuable lesson playing out too in that time of my time management because it's as you can imagine and like recognizing where things might go off track. So when I'm in consults now with clients, I'm quick to identify and then, tease it out with them in the consult conversation. This is where we see some minutia. Uh, but hey, this is where there's unknowns, and I want to honor your time. I want to honor the investment that we're making here. We'll work towards these boxes of the unknown, but I might end up needing to come back or leaving you with steps on how to do this.
Smart.
So,
Yeah. Getting so that
yeah,
everybody's clear. This is what's covered in the investment. This is what isn't.
yeah. So I was off to the races. I thought, okay, I'm doing staging, I'm doing organizing. The staging's happening, it's taking more of my time, but I'm starting to figure out clients. Maybe I won't have to stack wood at this time next year. Since we were newly married, we had this strong desire to buy a house. I know it's a hard, very like pipe dream for so many people. So that became kind of this all consuming goal. Finances are a very big part of that.
Yeah.
So luckily there and because my husband is wise, there was this nest egg and I contributed to it. He had put it away, long before we were together and had been building upon it. So in the spring of 2023, we were able to buy our first home in this community that now we were starting to get ingrained with. And I was still,
North Bend.
yeah, North Bend, Washington, and the Snoqualmie Valley. For anybody who's familiar, if you have anybody in the audience, like I would love to connect. So, yeah, it's so gorgeous there, and there's a really strong small business community. And I got plugged into what's called Keep It Local, which is kind of like BNI, but without the same structure where you're tracking referral dollars and revenue. It's more referrals for the sake of referrals, and there's also we have a strong component of giving back. That's who I was with this morning, giving back at Feed Kiddos or Feed the Kiddos, and I kind of marched in there as the stager and the organizer. I would say the blind confidence was at work. Like I said, I don't mind public speaking, so every day or every meeting, which is every Wednesday, you go around and you say your name and your business, what you do and what you're looking for in referrals, what's interesting, what's going on. Yes. It was so life-giving. Yeah. So I was quickly like, sign me up. I want to be in this group. And that was really the tipping point for me getting momentum with my business. And we're in 2023 at this point. So a lot of the business owners had me to their own homes and businesses for organizing, but there's a seasonality I've learned to what I do, and it ebbs and flows. So I'm noticing, okay, seasonality, busy, busy, busy. Holy moly, look at the month of May. I killed it. I've never made this much money in one month before. Oh my gosh. And then whoa, June, July, August, we have a mortgage. And then just like total tension because there's a reality to being an entrepreneur and being in a relationship and having finances together. Not to mention, like, year over year growth might mean something to just me and my business, but year over year growth when you live in the sixth most expensive city in the state doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, I love to talk about it because we're on the other side of it. We moved into a home that needed a lot of work. My business is growing, but it's not like it's all I obsess about all the time, all day long. First thing I wake up, think about when I wake up, I'm thinking about it in the middle of the night. And I'm back in this trying to get the clients. Where are the clients? What am I supposed to do? And then I've also just tried and failed staging, which cost me money to try and fail at. So it's just like this wave of shit. And it's not helping me feel trust with myself, and it was definitely not helping my husband feel trust either. And so we were having a lot of friction around, like, what are you doing? Like, what's next? So he's asking me, I'm asking me, and it forced my hand into, like, you have to do something else. You have to go back to corporate. Like, this isn't sustainable. And if you, like, what are your values here? What do you want? Because all that was coming out was, my business is my baby and this is all I'm worried about.
Mm.
Not fair. Not fair at all.
You learned from the previous relationship that
Yeah.
you couldn't just be single-mindedly focused on your own goals.
And I
Yeah.
also had the focus of, and the correct fact that, hey, it's growing. Like, you just give me time. That's just give
Yeah.
me time. So I was really rooted in that mentality. And it's not that it was wrong, it was just that the timing was wrong. And so, oh, and this sits heavy with me still too. I had to give up and let go of the sense of pride that came with me thinking that my timing was correct. Beyond my husband saying timing, it's more in the hands of God. And it's more about me looking up and going, how have you given me so much to be entrepreneurial and now be in this space with my business, and now it has to go away? What? So I really had to let that need for me to control, which is truly a hallmark of my personality. Like, it had to die again. It really had to die. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it led me to where I'm sitting right now. I have, again, an amazing corporate job. I do not have to be shy about what I do as an organizer. In fact, it's highly celebrated. And I manage our corporate real estate, and I'm actually heading to New York next week for a second time to work on finding an office. And I'm glad that the two things are intersecting right now, because I don't feel robbed of being an entrepreneur. Like, I've found I'm in the nonlinear part.
Mm-hmm.
I always will be, but I'm really in the thick of it right now. With I make it work to see clients on Thursday evenings and Friday evenings and give them Saturdays and Sundays. And it's organically, I've been in this business group long enough and done enough posts where they're finding me.
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, I saw this on Nextdoor. We would really like to get to know you and have your help. It's where it's supposed to be right now.
Mm, that's so beautiful. And I love that. I'm so happy for you in your wild journey. And I know like you're still on the journey as we all always will be and always are. Like we're just walking the path and it's illuminating itself for us one step at a time. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's such an amazing story that you have. And I would love if we could just wrap it all up with this. What would be the main piece of advice or just thing that you would want to share with your past self or to anyone who's really listening and resonating with your
Mhm.
story and has been on a similar journey of their own? What would you want to say?
I think the most relevant thing I could have told myself and that might really resonate is that it doesn't all fit into this neat little box. And of course this ties into this nonlinear path, but how you think it's supposed to be, what you think it is supposed to be, whatever you're making in a collage board and manifesting your vision board, it really might not be that. And that's okay. Just do the next right thing. Take a step that is the smallest step. Something else that comes to mind is the phrase, don't try to boil the ocean,
Hmm.
which is, I think, a lot of entrepreneurs like type A, you want to tackle the whole problem. You want to see the whole picture and just break it all down. And there's some merit to that, but it can also land you in analysis paralysis. And if anybody is just there right now, there's so many smaller pieces that I know you can identify. Even if it's just, I'm going to go buy the notebook that I need so I can write these things down. Like, that's so arbitrary, but sometimes just the right way to get your thoughts out is really powerful. But you might not even be thinking of that simple step because you're trying to stay at 30,000 feet. And some entrepreneurs are so successful because their brains are so strategic. But yeah, get in the weeds with yourself and just find the smallest first step and then take the next one.
Because strategy without intuition is kind of hollow.
Ooh, yes, well said.
Thank you for that. And thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It means so much to have you here and to have this conversation. If you could just tell us about your website, tell us where people can get in touch with you, how they can get involved, or any kind of special offers that you might have going at the moment.
Oh, thank you. I have Instagram and website and Pinterest, a couple places I can be found. My handle is Organize and Spruce. So anywhere you're on social media for the most part, Adrienne at organizeandspruce.com. I love to meet with other entrepreneurs and have conversations like this. There's so much to be gained from, oh my gosh, I feel that too. So
Yes.
thank you for having me on because we definitely had those moments together too.
Yes. It's so valuable to just know we're not
Mhm.
alone in this journey.
Mhm.
And that's a beautiful thing to have. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Creative Freedom Plan podcast. And if you loved it so much you'd like to shout from the rooftops and share it on social media, be sure to screenshot, tag me at Michal Emily Schuster, and share it to your story so I can stalk your profile and we can connect over there. Much love to you, and I will see you in the next episode.